Is Albert Pujols 85 years old?
I don't know, but I think he's older than me.
So, Mike, I'm in the press box of the old Metrodome. Horrible stadium. Everybody knows that. That's why they imploded it. Actually, it collapsed on itself during the snowstorm.
Not good with snow.
Horrible stadium. But I was covering the Twins playing against the Royals. This would have had to have been in 96, 97. And I'm sitting there in the press box eating hot dogs and kielbasa, and that's what you do, right? And all of a sudden, this old guy sits next to me. We're talking baseball, but he's calling every pitch. And I'm like, wow, he knows this stuff. But we're talking fishing and knees and golf and all this stuff, and really a good conversation. He's talking about his grandkids, all that. And then all of a sudden, third inning comes by and they put a box of baseballs in front of him. And when they did that, I look over and he signs it. It's Harmon Killebrew. And I'm like, the home run hitter, it's the king. And everybody's, paying homage to the king as they go through. And it was fantastic to see that. But he introduced everybody. I want you to meet my friend JD. I want you to meet my friend JD. He signed a thing for me. It's, framed in my house now. But yeah, I got to meet Dan Gladden, Kent Herbeck, just all the classic Twins that went by. But I was oblivious for 3 innings that I'm sitting next to this guy. And that's how cool he was. But it was amazing how he could call every pitch, which is kind of poignant for today's conversation, Mike.
Yeah, I would say so. It's always nice to hear a story about meeting a celebrity or an athlete and that they're actually a good person, that they actually want to talk to you and get to know you and they're not bothered by you.
Yeah. And our guest, Steve Miller, is kind of that guy in the Tampa Bay Devil Rays organization. He's director of international scouting, and he's got some fantastic stories. So when we come back, we're going to dive into his brain on baseball and oh so much more. Stick around.
Our guest today is a former baseball coach turned scout. He spent 13 years of coaching in college, then transitioned to scouting in 2006 when he joined the Toronto Blue Jays organization as a regional scout. He then joined the Tampa Bay Rays organization as an international scout in 2013 and is now the director of international scouting. Let's welcome my friend, my neighbor, the scout, Steve Miller.
Hey, Mike. Hey, JD.
Hey, Steve.
Welcome, Steve. Welcome, Steve. And we have so many questions for you. And Mike, if you don't mind, I'd like to start out because you spent time in college and coaching in college and then transitioned to this international scouting role. Talk to me, how do your experiences as a coach really translate and shape your approaches, leadership in scouting, especially in building trust from young players from diverse backgrounds?
I think it started as a player. As a player, I had a really inquisitive personality, and I played at a school that was known primarily for football and wrestling. And my baseball coach was a football coach that was supplementing his income to coach baseball, and he did the best he could do, but he just wasn't well versed in the game. So I went to a junior college. I was 6 of us from the wrestling team went to the same college. Our wrestling coach was a national champion there. So I was trying to decide between playing baseball and wrestling. And I was a better wrestler than baseball player, but I always wanted to play baseball as opposed to wrestle. And fortunately, a friend of mine was the catcher on that team. He was a year older than me, and he talked the coach into watching me, and things worked out. So I ended up at that school with my friends. And as much as I enjoyed playing for that coach, Tom Hilton was his name, he was a left-handed pitcher, and we didn't have a hitting coach. So my roommate was a transfer from the University of Washington, and I everything he did, I liked. I mean, the way he caught ground balls, the way that he took care of himself, the way that he hit. So I would just watch him from the other side of the base. I was playing second, he was playing short, and I would try to do everything that he did. And finally, I was asking him about hitting, and he gave me this book. It was written by a guy named Steve Ferroli, and he's the most knowledgeable guy I've ever been around hitting-wise. And I read the book, and I thought it was a really difficult book for me to understand. I'm trying to read and figure out how my body's supposed to move. So I called the publishing company and asked if I could get his phone number. And they said that they were not going to give me his phone number, but they would be more than happy to pass mine on to him. And I thought I'd never hear from him again. Well, anyway, he called a couple of days later and we had a great conversation. And because of that, he invited me to go out and play for his summer league team in Boston. And I went out there and played for him a couple of years. And he even came to the school that I was at and worked with our hitters for a week. And I think that's really what started things off, that just trying to find a better way to teach whatever it was. And then my passion was hitting. So I tried to play as long as I could. I couldn't stay healthy long enough. I ended up having 4 knee surgeries and just recently had my knee replaced. But to be honest, I wasn't good enough anyway. I was just too small. If I was gonna wrestle, I was gonna wrestle 120 or 118, which they don't even have that weight any longer in college. So I was a really small, throw right, hit left, defensive oriented second baseman that could run. And there's not there's not much of a market for that, especially when you had 4 knee surgeries. So I was at the college I went to after junior college. It's a school in Alabama. And I went down there. I transferred to Kansas State trying to get my knee in shape to play baseball there. And for spring training, I went back to that school that I was at in Alabama just to see my friends. And while I was there, the head coach offered me a coaching position. And I told him that I was not interested. I had another year of eligibility and I'll get my knee back in shape. And at the time I'd had 3 surgeries. So I tried and it just didn't respond the way I thought it was going to. And I called him back and asked if that position was still available. And he hired me. And so I played there. And then, I coached there. And then a year later, I coached at the junior college I played at. And while I was there, my head coach at that school told me I need to get my master's degree if I want to continue coaching in college. So I stopped coaching at the end of the year, went to Wichita State, got my master's degree. And then out of pure coincidence, I was looking for a place to coach. I'd narrowed it down to 3 different schools for different reasons. And the first place I called was the University of Washington. And Kenny Knutson was the head coach there. And Kenny answers his own phone. We have an amazing conversation. I just finished grad school at Wichita State. Didn't even know this, but Kenny was a volunteer coach at Wichita State before he took the head coaching job at Washington. So the conversation ended with him saying, "When can you be here? I have a spot for you as soon as you can come up, if it can be before semester." So I went up there and got to work for Kenny Knutson, who was an amazing manager of the game. I got to work with Joe Ross, who was an amazing hitting coach. I went to Wichita State, worked with Gene Stevenson, who at that time was the winningest head coach in college baseball history. He's now 3rd, I believe, behind Mike Martin and Augie Garrido. But and Brent Kemna's the most legendary. He's a legendary pitching coach. And then Mike Clark and B.D. Parker. And I just was able to work with some of the most amazing baseball minds and baseball people that I've could ever imagined. And a kid from El Reno, Oklahoma, that went to high school in Derby, Kansas, would have never thought that I was going to be able to be in the same dugout and even a step further, the same office as those legends. And I think that's what formed I took bits and pieces from all of them. I learned mechanics of hitting from Steve Ferroli. I learned how to manage the game from Kenny Knutson. I learned how to manage people from watching how Gene at Wichita State, how Gene handled his staff and how he handled players. And the biggest thing that I took away from that, I think, was just trying to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand what it is that makes them tick and maybe where they're coming from. And I didn't realize, that was trying to work with, usually I would generally have close to 18 position players. We usually have 18 position players and about 15 pitchers. And I was in charge of the position players at most of the schools that I was at. And understanding the different personalities of different 18 to 22-year-old kids, what motivates them, how to get through to them if they're having a rough time with their girlfriend or a rough time at school, and you still need your 2 hours on the field to be uninterrupted with what's going on in their mind. So trying to be able to walk them through that, trying to understand where they came from and what they're going through, that really helped me with the managing of people part. But when I transitioned into the international market, like Mike said, in 2013, after being a scout for, I think, 9 years with Toronto, all in the United States, I had never spent time outside the country, really. I had a couple of vacations here and there, but to be now in charge of, so I started in 2013 as an international cross-checker, which basically is similar to like a regional manager. There was a scouting director, and then there's a cross-checker. And the cross-checker is, my basic job was to compare the shortstop from Venezuela to the center fielder from Colombia to the right-handed pitcher from Mexico to the catcher from Dominican, and say, okay, these are the 5 guys that I've seen. This is how I would rank them, and this is how much money I would give them. And then I would talk to the director, and the scouting director would make his decision on who we're going to try to procure and how much money. So in 2019, Carlos Rodriguez was my director. Carlos was named assistant general manager and elevated me to the director of international scouting. So now I have 36 people around the world, from as far as the Pac Rim to everywhere other than Puerto Rico, United States, and Canada. Those all fall under the draft. So fortunately, I was able to work with Carlos for 6 years and kind of get to understand the different cultures and try to understand what makes people from Venezuela tick and what makes people from the Dominican tick, and the struggles, especially now, the political struggles that are going on in Venezuela, to be able to truly empathize with them now, because I've been down there so many times. But I think that was a big help. The fact that I had Carlos, who was able to, who had done this before, who was able to explain different cultures, the different pitfalls, and then just getting to know the people and trying to put myself in their shoes. I think that's probably that from start to finish, it's just been an evolution, but that's kind of how it all started.
Thanks for all that background, Steve. It's really interesting to hear the differences of different cultures and how it affects your job and the decisions you make and how you work too. So getting all that origin and that background is amazing. And, hearing about leadership, because this podcast is focused on leadership and coaching. So hearing about that is great too. Perseverance. I guess it all brings me to this question. Is Albert Pujols 85 years old?
I don't know, but I think he's older than me.
And also, speaking real, are performance enhancing drugs a thing of the past?
Well, first, to go back to Albert, I did get to recruit Albert. I scouted him when I was at Kansas State. He was at Maple Woods Junior College in Missouri, and I was at Kansas State. So I did get to see him as an amateur. To answer your question, I think it's really been cleaned up at the big league level. And I think because of the drug testing policies, it's even been cleaned up a lot at the minor league level. I think where you're seeing the prevalence of it, and it's still, unfortunately, it's still an issue, is in amateur baseball, specifically the international market. MLB does a nice job of drug testing on the international market when the year before these players are eligible to sign. On the international market, players can sign when they're 16 years old. It's basically they have to be 16 before September 1st of the year before they sign. So like this year, for example, our signing date will be January of 2025. That's when we can sign the next class. That class of players had to be 16 years old before before the last day of August. So in the United States, they have to finish high school, be 18 years old, or if they go to a junior college, they're eligible after a year. If they go to a 3-year school, they're eligible after the age of 21 or after their 3rd year. Internationally, we can sign them when they're 16. So when they're 15, MLB drug tests them and registers them and makes sure that they're the age they say they are, who they say they are, and drug tests, all of that. But we're making commitments to players that are younger than that. So, the industry is making, we're watching players when they're 12 years old. We start watching them 12, 13, 14 years old. And these agents are contributing to some of the steroid epidemic that's going on. And some of these young kids are using PEDs and then getting it out of their system by the time they're 15 when they're drug tested. So that's one of the things that we really have to watch out for. We have to, one of the toughest parts about our job is, number one, making sure, again, they say they are who they say they are, how old they say they are, what kind of performance enhancing drugs they're using, if any, and then what would happen to them if they get life-changing money coming from the backgrounds that they come from. And $10,000 in many cases is life-changing money. $4 million certainly is life-changing money, but you just have to know how they're going to respond when they get that payday.
Yeah, I want to pull on that thread a little bit, because you're scouting these young athletes, and many are leaving home and adapting to a new environment, let alone a new country, for a chance at the big leagues. So how do you, as a leader, ease that transition for them, foster their confidence on and off the field as a team? I know it's not just you, it's your whole team.
Well, we have a really good group of area scouts, and our area scouts have really good relationships with these players. And we start establishing that relationship the first time that we see them. We try to do in-home visits and get to know the families. We try to get to know the players. We have good relationships with many of the agents, not all. I mean, you're never gonna have a perfect working relationship with all of them, but we have a good one with almost all of them, because we do things the right way. At least I think that we do. We're honest and we're fair, and we've done a really nice job of keeping our commitments and then developing our players, and that helps a lot. We have a really good player development group that we feel like when we hand these players off to the development group, they're going to improve, and the agents know that also. But go back to your question. So our area guys build that relationship from day one, and they continue that relationship up until in many cases after the player's released, or certainly after he becomes a big leaguer. And there are conversations that we have to have. And this is a conversation that I had 2 months ago when I was in the Dominican. I was watching one of our players, really talented player, but he didn't look like he was having any fun. He didn't look like he was, he wasn't in the right frame attitude wise. It was something that I felt concerning, and because this player usually has a tremendous amount of intensity and passion and effort, and I didn't see it. And I asked our coaches, how long has this been going on? And they said that they'd addressed it once or twice. And I said, why am I just finding out about this? And so I called our scout, the signing scout, right away. Our signing scout called him, had a good heart-to-heart with him, and then called the agent that afternoon. And the agent called him that night, and they talked through the issues. And like you said, that he'd left home, he's a little bit homesick, and just basically talked him through it. And the last 2 months have been really, really good. He's getting close to being able to go home for the holidays. As soon as this part of our season ends, he'll go home and spend time with his family for the holidays. But yeah, that kind of stuff should not be lost. These are young kids that are being, that are, even though they're chasing their dream, it's still not easy to be away from your family and go through rough times. They've never failed before in their life, and all of them are getting a taste of failure as soon as they step into professional baseball.
Hey, Steve, when you're looking at someone that is 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and you might sign them, you might give them a big paycheck, what attributes are you seeing that indicate someone that could be a major league player?
It's different. It's different, and it's a difficult thing. But basically, there's a fine line between projecting and guessing. And we try to project. We try to stay away from guesswork. And even though there's a lot of guesswork involved, the biggest thing is to try to have a process. And I feel like I think that we've done a really nice job as a department of self-evaluation and honest self-evaluation. I think that we've created a process, and we have constantly questioned our process, and we've constantly tried to refine our process. I encourage all of our guys to embrace failure. I try to get them to not to shy away from failure. I want them to embrace it. I think that we truly learn more when we fail than when we succeed. So we try to have a process. And generally what we look for is we look for young, projectable athletic bodies. So young bodies that are athletic and are going to get bigger and stronger. Baseball doesn't look like it until you get next to them, but it's a strong man's game. These are big, these players out there, they're big. And that's the first thing that everyone that gets close to big league players, it's the first thing they always say is, man, they're a lot bigger than I thought. So they have to have enough size to be able to maintain their strength over 162 game season. And even the little guys are big. We have some guys that aren't necessarily tall, but they're strong. And so that's the first thing we look for: young, athletic, projectable bodies. And then from a mechanical standpoint, we look for, if it's a position player, we generally try to find someone that's going to stay in the middle of the field: catcher, shortstop, center field. Biggest reason, number one, there's more value in those players, but also when those players can't stay at that position, there's a place for them to branch off. A shortstop can go to second, third, maybe even the outfield. If you're a right fielder and you can't play right field any longer, you're pretty much going to DH or out of the game. So we try to stay in the middle of the field, pitcher included. We look for guys who have the ability to contribute on both halves of an inning. So can not only hit, but can play defense, but knowing that the bat is going to be the primary driver. So we really focus from that young age mechanically, or from a skill standpoint, on their ability to hit and play a defensive position with at least average standard. From a pitching standpoint, it's the ability to land the ball in the strike zone and get players out with the stuff that you have when it's in the strike zone. And that's just the mechanics and the skill of the game. And we can find those players almost everywhere. Those are not difficult players to find. What is difficult is to find someone who has the makeup. And when we talk about makeup, it's a really commonly used catchphrase, but it's really hard to define. The way I define it is your makeup going to enable you, or is it going to enable you to get your potential? And makeup to me is a combination of aptitude, intelligence, athleticism, work ethic, integrity. There's so many things: the ability to handle failure, the ability to self-evaluate and honestly self-evaluate, the ability to work on your weakness and to the point where it becomes a strength. So all of those things are, those are the difficult things to find. They're also the difficult things to evaluate. But from a skill standpoint, that's what we look for. From a makeup standpoint, we look for that guy who is going to do everything he can to get to his potential.
Outstanding. Well, we're going to find out your potential because we're going to take a quick break, Steve. And when we come back, you're going to be in Kreissl's corner. He's got lots of great questions for you. Then I want to dive into life on the road as a scout and all the challenges you have there. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we have Kreissl's corner. Everyone in the fam was driving me bonkers, arguing on where to go on vacation this year. She wanted to go to the beach. I wanted to go to the mountains. And our kid, well, he just wanted to go see Mickey in Orlando. Then I discovered yourownvacay.com. At yourownvacay.com, you get all the best deals to split up your family across the U.S. and get the much needed solitude you need and deserve. Whether it's catching some rays alone, skiing some slopes alone, or yakking up your lunch on a roller coaster alone, everyone gets to go where they want, and thankfully without each other. So this year, take a vacation from your family vacation with yourownvacay.com. I just really need some time alone.
It's Miller time in Kreissl's corner, and we have two Millers, which is kind of fun. We should have invited Reggie Miller too. He was busy, I think. But here we are. Got a couple rapid fire questions for you, Steve, if you're ready. Here we go. Which Miller is a famous playwright? Dennis Miller, Arthur Miller, or Sienna Miller?
Arthur Miller.
Correct. Will Ohtani be better than Babe Ruth?
Yes.
Wow.
Whoa, okay. Is Baby Ruth better than Butterfinger?
No question.
Speaking of Butterfingers, What is the biggest error in MLB history, in your opinion?
Has to be Buckner.
Yeah, Buckner was pretty rough.
Yeah, Jeffrey Bartman, but that's not fair.
Poor Bartman. All right. What is the greatest team ever?
75 Cincinnati Reds.
If Ozzie Smith didn't do flips, would he still be an all-star?
He would still be an all-star. The flips do help, though. Got him on the first ballot, I think.
And finally, I've asked this one before. JD knows I like this question, but I have to ask it to a baseball guy. What is your favorite baseball movie?
Long Gone.
Nice. You survived Kreisl's corner, Steve.
That was tough. I'm beaten up a little bit.
Well, speaking of beaten up, over 200 days on the road, each year you're hitting all of these different countries, constantly traveling to discover talent in countries. And I know you've got your team out there as well. So how do you maintain resilience and focus in such a demanding schedule? And what keeps you passionate about the role?
The challenge is what keeps me passionate about it. It's, anyone that says that they have this figured out is just being unrealistic with themselves, or maybe being unrealistic with you. I was talking to our scouts just moments ago on a hub call. Every time I push send on my report, I take a deep breath. And every morning I get up and look at that, the game reports from the night before, I get a sick feeling in my stomach. I mean, it's, we're being asked to predict the future, and we're making these decisions, and we care about these players so much. And we care about, obviously we care about our organization so much, but even, regardless of the job, this is I think that I live in the toy store of life, but it's a job where you have to produce. And if we're not putting prospects in the system, then we'll be looking for a job. But I don't even worry about my job. I care about these kids so much. And every one of these kids, especially from the international side, has an amazing story to tell, but it doesn't matter until they get to the big leagues. When they get to the big leagues, then it's an amazing story. So I love the guys that I work with. The places that we go, that we travel, they're not all vacation destinations. There's some scary spots, and there's, we put ourselves in harm's way in many different ways. Not only, whether it be some of the food that we eat, or the areas of countries that we go to, or the countries that we go to. But I love every guy that I work with, and girl. Our scout in Mexico is Carla Espinosa, and she's wonderful. But all of our scouts are really good human beings and good people, and most importantly, good friends. But for me to have the resilience, I need a couple things. I need to get a workout in, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a long one, but I have to do something. So our days are really long down there. We'll generally get up at 6, have breakfast, and get on the road at 7. We'll usually hit 3 to 4 different locations and watch different workouts. And it's hot. It's hot every day. And you're at these workouts watching players. And sometimes there's one player that you're watching. Sometimes there may be 30 kids on a team or on a field. And generally they don't even have fields. There would be like a group of players in one corner, and then there'll be another group of players that's maybe like 12 years old in the left field corner. And there's maybe a group of 8-year-olds in the right field corner. And you're trying to watch all of them. And you're trying to say, hey, who's that little kid over there? Let's see if he'll come over to this field and work him out. And we usually get home, get back to the hotel around 5:30 or 6, take a quick shower. And then I take the staff out to eat. And by the time we get back, it's 10 o'clock. And, depending on how many players I saw that day, I'm behind on reports. And each report takes me about 22 minutes. Unless I'm watching TV, then it's about 30. And, I try to keep up on those, because when I come home, it's not fair for me to be on the computer when I only have a couple of days home and I'm not spending my time with my wife or my kids. So I try to keep up with those. And by the time it's midnight, 12:30 by the time I go to bed, and then I have to get back up at 6 again. And it's really difficult to get a workout in. And you really have to get creative and just make time. And that's one of the things I've realized. I have to make time to do it. And the other thing is I have to learn, and I think I'm improving on this, but it's still a challenge for me. I have to learn to be able to say no. Before I got married, I was on the road about 280 nights a year. Now that I'm married, it's depending on the year, sometimes 220, sometimes 240. So I'm still out a lot. And if I don't learn to say no, the scouts always want me in their area. They know that if I get in their area, they have a chance to sign the player. If I'm not in their area, they have basically no chance. So, I'll get a call every day. Hey, can you come to Venezuela next week? Can you come to Colombia? Can you come to Panama? Can you come to Curacao? And I have to be able to say no, or I would just, I wouldn't have a wife or a family.
Steve, the Rays, like many teams, don't have the resources like the Dodgers or the Yankees. And it's becoming a strange MLB right now, seeing teams like that really spend so much money and use every resource possible to compete for a championship every single year. But the Rays have been competitive regardless of that. And it's really impressive. So I guess my question is, what do you think makes a good team have high chemistry on a lower budget?
I can speak for us. And one of the things that I think that we've always done a really nice job, and we lose really good people every year. We just lost Cole Figueroa and Taylor Smith this year. Cole went to Texas as an assistant GM, and Taylor just went to Boston as an assistant GM. And we lost Andrew Friedman, who's now with the Dodgers. We've lost James Click, who won a World Series with Houston. We lost Matt Arnold, who's now with the GM with Milwaukee, and we lost Chaim Bloom, who's getting ready to be next year. He's going to take over as a GM in St. Louis. And every year we lose really good people. Peter Bendix is now the GM with the Marlins. So we lose wonderful people. But the thing that we always do is we replace good people with good people. We don't even, it was when I first met, I interviewed with Andrew Friedman when I came here, and the one thing he said is, he goes, I really don't get too concerned with the roles that people are going to play or what we're going to put you in. We're going to find great people, and then we'll plug them in where they fit. And I think that's one thing that we do from our hiring standpoint. We surround ourselves with great people and really, really smart people that will challenge you. There's no one on our staff that would rather have someone that is less intelligent than them. They want someone that's smarter, better than they are, so they can get challenged and be pulled up by that person. So from a hiring standpoint, that's how we look at things. We also know that with as wonderful as our ownership is, Stuart Sternberg is amazing. He's given us everything we need. We also know that we have a limited, we can't spend like some of these other teams. So we've invested our resources in scouting and development. Our pro scouting department, Ryan Bristow is a scouting director. He does an amazing job. Chuck Ritchie is our scouting director on the amateur side, does an amazing job. We're all trying to compete for roster spots with a really talented group of players that, I'm trying to bring international players in to compete against the amateur players and the pro players that we're trading for. So it's hard, but we all take pride in trying to put the best players possible together. And then like I said earlier, once we get them into the system, I truly believe that our development staff can take them from where they are now and get them to their potential. And if we've done a good job of signing the players, then their potential is big leaguer. If we've missed on our evaluation, then they'll still get them to be a AA, AAA organizational player. But so that's from the scouting standpoint. And then that last piece, and is just as important as the hiring and the scouting, is our research and development department. They are second to none. They're amazing. And the collaboration between our research and development, our international, our amateur, and our pro scouting, and our front office and our player development is so strong that, like you said, we're able to continually put out quality teams every year. And this is the first year we didn't make the playoffs in the last 6 years. I think next year we're going to have a strong bounce back year. We get some guys back from the injury list that I'm excited for. But I think that if I were to sum it up real quickly, it's the collaboration between those four departments and knowing that it's a challenge. And we would rather have all the money in the world. I'd rather go out and get Juan Soto and whoever else is out there. But sometimes we're in play for those guys, sometimes we're not. But we can't make excuses just because we don't have the same payroll as some of the other teams.
Tell me a little bit about a memorable one that got away. A player that you scouted, you almost had him, part of the Rays organization, but didn't. And what did you learn from that experience as a leader?
I would say one of them, there's several. So Fernando Tatis Jr., that was one that unfortunately we were penalized because we had gone over budget in 2014. So we couldn't afford him, but he was a really tough one to see slip through the cracks. Vlad Guerrero Jr. was another one we were penalized. We didn't get a chance to go after him. I think that maybe Jason Dominguez, who got some big league time last year. He's a young kid. He was 16 in 2019. So he's probably 23 now. He got some time with the Yankees last year. He's a prospect. He's really good, really talented player. And another one was Julio Rodriguez. So in both of those cases, Julio's with Seattle. In both of those cases, we really liked the player. We just, we were trying, we didn't want to work in advance like we are now. So like I said, Jason was eligible in 2019. At that time, this was 2017. At that time, teams were starting to work 2 and 3 years in advance. And which means they're committing 13 and 14-year-old kids. And we weren't ready to do that. And unfortunately, we missed on a guy like Jason just because we were trying to be responsible. We were trying to make sound decisions. We didn't want to jump into that pool. And he came off the board and he's been really good. Now, maybe in the long run, maybe it saved us some money, but it still stings when I see him in the big leagues and know that he was number one on my list that year. And the same with Julio Rodriguez. We committed some money to somebody else, and we didn't have money for Julio that same year. And that's the most difficult thing of this job, other than the things that I mentioned earlier about trying to understand, how old a kid is and how his life-changing money is going to change him. We don't have a draft on the international side. It's all free agent. So every decision we make is opportunity cost. So, in the draft, you line up the players and the best player that's still on the board, you pull that magnet, that's who you get. On the international side, you see a shortstop tomorrow, switch hitting shortstop who can really play defense, and you think he can hit, and you think he can hit for power, and it's going to cost you $3 million. Do you invest that $3 million on him today, not knowing what you're going to see 8 months from now, a year from now? So every decision we make is opportunity cost. So we have to figure out, how high do we set this bar? At what point do we say, I don't care what else is out there, I don't care who we see, we're not going to get better than this? And that's kind of what happened with this. Like I said, when we saw Julio Rodriguez, we'd already committed money to a player, and he ended up being a really good player. I'm really happy with the player that we got, but he wasn't Rookie of the Year.
Out of all the coaches maybe that you've had or even seen in any sport, what do you think makes a good leader and a good coach? And is there anyone that comes to mind offhand?
Kelsey Anderson to me is the greatest coach of all time in any sport. He's the wrestling coach at Penn State, which is not, there's so many amazing coaches.
Iowa State guy, by the way, Iowa State guy. I got to throw that out there.
Iowa State guy. Yeah. Dan Gable, Iowa. There's just so many. You could throw out a sport, and I could probably name 5 that I would have a hard time deciding which one was one. They're just amazing. Mike Krzyzewski, I love reading his books, and Lead from the Heart, I believe is the name of it. But and John Wooden and Red Auerbach, they're just so many amazing coaches. I think one thing to me that makes them successful is whoever said work smarter, not harder, is, in my opinion, one of the laziest people I've ever met, trying to justify why he doesn't work hard. There are 2 ways I believe 2 ways to get ahead in any field, in anything you do. And that's be willing to do what other people won't, and be willing to do it better than other people can. Work harder than them, be better at it, and don't let anyone beat you in any area of, your life, whether you're talking about being a husband, whether you're talking about being a dad, whether you're talking about being an athlete, whether you're talking about being a CEO. I will not let anyone outwork me, and I will do everything I can to become an expert in my field and turn my weaknesses into a strength. Like I said, I was passionate about hitting. I knew nothing about pitching. I never pitched, but I spent so much time investing in pitching and talking to great pitchers, talking to great pitching coaches, trying to understand how that works and how bodies move biomechanically, and different grips, and that I just if there are two things that I would say that sums up what all these good players are, these amazing athletes, these amazing coaches, these amazing CEOs, they outwork you, and they're better at what they do. And maybe that just means that they hire someone that's better than them, that can come in and be better. But they surround themselves with good people, and they outwork you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Steve, this has been fantastic. We could sit for hours, and actually we probably will later on tonight. Sit for hours and continue to talk about this, but wonderful insights, and that's a great way to end. Steve, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks so much.
I really appreciate it.
Well, I knew it would be a good conversation, knowing Steve for years now, and he loves to dig in, talk about not only baseball in general, but what he loves about it and how he loves taking care of these people and their families as well. I thought that was really interesting.
And such a nice guy, and you need that, I guess, in that profession, because you're going into people's homes of kids. Really, it's kids going into their homes and saying, "Trust me." And our organization is going to help you in your career and in your life and help your family out. So you got to be a good guy. And Steve is that, and then some.
I was really interested to hear that he picked Baby Ruth over Butterfinger. I'm a Butterfinger guy, but I get it. I get it, Steve. It's okay.
Well, it was a fantastic conversation, and a big thank you to Steve for being with us. If you want to listen to past episodes of C Level Up, you can go to wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to jamesdwayne.com. Thank you so much for listening.